All right, this video is going to be about Revelation chapter 13. Just to kind of pick you up on some context real quick, we have already gone through the first major two sections of the book of Revelation, the 7 letters to the 7 churches, and the process of opening the scroll, not only reading what the scroll says, but initiating those events. And so now we're on the third major section of the book of Revelation, which is a series of 7 visions that talk about this spiritual warfare that's happening behind the scenes. It's kind of like this: the 7 letters to the 7 churches in chapters 2 and 3. Those 7 letters are in the front of the curtain. That's real life. This is what it looks like to live as a Christian in the world where we're surrounded by hostile forces. But then you pull the curtain back and you start to see that behind the scenes there are spiritual forces at work that are making Christians' lives miserable, persecuting God's people because they're God's people. And so that's what these 7 visions are. They are the behind the scenes picture of spiritual warfare and what God's people can expect from this life and expect in the next life. So we have already gone through chapter 12, which is the first of those 7 visions. And chapter 12 is this story of a woman and a dragon. The thing that you would remember about chapter 12 is the dragon. The woman, the dragon, the woman has a child, Jesus, and the dragon doesn't want the child to be born, but he is. And the child, Jesus, has defeated the dragon, and the dragon's been kicked out of heaven, and now he's mad, and his entire focus in his life is to come after the children of the women, which is us, because he's been defeated by Jesus. And so that's really the big explanation for why things are the way that they are, because Jesus has defeated the dragon, and the dragon is mad, and we're suffering because of it. So that's chapter 12. That's vision number 1. This video is going to be chapter 13 and verses 1 through 10, and that's going to be the second vision. So let's get there. Turn my Bible on. We're going to go to Revelation chapter 13, and we've already listed, I think this should be true for you, we've already listed the major section that this is the second vision. If I click on this note, you can see over here that this is the second of 7 visions. And the point of this video is we're going to have to give that a name. The first of the visions is going to be something like War with the Dragon. What is this second vision? So let's do this. I'm gonna read this in big chunks. We're gonna do a lot of reading in this video because I don't know a better way to do it. But I'm gonna tell you right now that this one is a little bit hard for me. The beast rising out of the sea and the second beast that we're gonna see in the third vision in the next video, the beast that's rising up out of the earth. These are a little bit difficult for me because they're kind of abstract. And I don't have all of the answers that I would like to have about who these beasts are and even how these beasts operate. And so there's going to be some questions and there's going to be some gaps in some of these. And some of the answers are going to be, it's easy to look at the dragon and say, oh, hey, look, the dragon is Satan. It's not so easy to look at the different beasts and say, oh, the beast rising up out of the sea, that is, and give it a name. It's not as easy as that. And so that's a little frustrating. But this chapter is going to be a difficult one for that reason. But I would encourage you to not get too far lost in the weeds and to just try and keep an eye towards the big picture, because that ultimately is what we're doing in this series of videos, is we're trying to answer the question, what is the book of Revelation about? And so our main thing is going to be, what are we going to highlight yellow? What is the main point? Not what do the 10 horns mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? No. What is the main point of this section? That's what we're looking for as we read. So, let's go ahead and read our sea beast section first. Revelation chapter 13 and verses 1 through 10. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea. That don't just highlight the beast. Pay attention that he's coming out of the sea. It's very important to remember that he's coming out of the sea. I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its head. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it, the dragon, that's the dragon from chapter 12 that we've already talked about, and to this beast, the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. One of its heads, the dragon, one of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound. But its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" Scroll down to verse 5. And the beast was given a mouth, uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming the name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. And authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation. And all who dwell on the earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword must he be slain. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. Okay, so you can probably already start with what in the world are we going to do with this? But there's a couple things that I think are going to make this at least a little bit more manageable for us. And the first thing is this section is very, very obviously a reference to Daniel chapter 7. So let's just go ahead and write that now. I'll write it in my Bible and I'll show you. Well, how about this? I'll show you first so you can write it while I continue to talk. Here is my Bible. And here's where we are right now. I saw a beast rising out of the sea, and I wrote with my teal pen because for me, teal is, this is a quote or a reference to some other place in the Bible. And so I don't like to do this normally, but I even just wrote Daniel chapter 7, like the whole chapter. This is going to be a really big chapter, and I told you there's going to be a lot of reading. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up this note next to I saw a beast rising out of the sea. And I think what I'm going to do, since I can type it and I have lots of room, is just put something like this. This chapter, or how about this? The imagery from this chapter is all from Daniel 7. So now we need to go and read Daniel chapter 7. I think it's 28 verses. It's a lot, but it's really important. This time, in the whole rest of the book of Revelation, sometimes we can just make references. Sometimes we don't even need to make the references. This time we do. It's really, really important for understanding this chapter and getting a sense of what's going on in this chapter. So I'm going to click over to Daniel chapter 7, and let's just go ahead and start reading. You can see I've already marked it up. You can do that in your Bible if you want, and you'll understand it. Orange is a section, the 4 beasts that came up out of the sea, and then the 4 beasts are purple. These are the 4 different beasts. I'm not going to go through that, but if you want, you can do that. Daniel chapter 7 and verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and 4 great beasts came up out of the sea. Okay, look, we've already got a connection. I saw a beast rising out of the sea in Revelation 13:1. In Daniel chapter 7, 4 great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. In verse 4, the first was like a lion. That should sound familiar to you. All of these should sound familiar to you. The first was like a lion, had eagle's wings, and then I looked, and its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground, and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and the mind of a man was given to it. Behold, another beast, a second one, was like a bear, and it was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and behold, another like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back, and the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. That's another thing that's common between these, is dominion and power are given to these 4 different beasts. In verse 7, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful, exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. Oh, I gotta scroll here. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Okay, that at least is something that's common between these two also. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. That's something worth paying attention to, is multiple times throughout this story, we're going to find that the beast or the horns on the beast or something, they've all got a mouth. And they're all not just speaking great things, they're speaking blasphemous things. That's a connection between Revelation and Daniel. Let's just keep reading for the sense of the text here. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head was pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. So you've got God. This is a picture of God. And one of the connections between Daniel 7 and Revelation 13 is the book. There's books that are open. And in Revelation 13, we read about those. In verse 8, it said, have been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb. So there's a connection there between the books. I'm going to go back and list not all of the connections, but at least some of the connections. Verse 11. I looked then because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed. That's the 4th beast. The beast was killed and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beast, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. Verse 13. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like the Son of Man, And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. I have this highlighted because, in my opinion, Daniel 7 and verse 14 is one of the most important verses in the entire Bible. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. Verse 15, as for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious, and the visions of my head alarmed me. I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all this, and he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. So we just read the story of the vision, and then Daniel asked an angel, what does the vision mean? And he says, I'm going to tell you what it means now. Whew, thank goodness. But we don't get all of the answers. Verse 17, these four great beasts are four kings who shall arise out of the earth. That might be something worth paying attention to. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, forever, and ever. Verse 19, then I desired to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, and which devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. And so I want to know about the fourth beast. And then in verse 20 he says, and I want to know about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell, the horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke great things and that seemed greater than its companions. So here's the horn again, and it's mouthy, blasphemies, speaking great things. Verse 21, as I look, this horn, this is important to pay attention to, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them. So it's not just that these beasts are out there doing beastie things, it's that this beast especially is fighting against God's people. And this is really important to notice. Not only is it fighting against God's people, it is overcoming them. It's winning, prevailing against them. It's the beast, the horn on the beast is fighting against the saints in verse 22, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High, and the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. Verse 23, thus he said, as for the fourth beast, there shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth and trample it down and break it to pieces. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the former ones, and shall put down 3 kings. He shall speak words against the Most High. There are the words again. He shall speak words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High. There's the war against God's people again. And shall think to change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand. So God's people are going to be given into his hand. The beast, the horn, is going to win. And listen to this. Here's how long it's going to last. For a time, times, and half a time. That ought to sound familiar to you. But the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away, to be consumed and destroyed to the end. Verses 27 and 28. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven, that's on the earth. You have up there, and then you have everything under there, which is this life under the earth. The greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Here's the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, and my color changed, but I kept the matter in my heart. So there is Daniel chapter 7. I think what I would like to do is not make a list. I've got a list, but this is not a complete list. It would be worth your time, I think, to spend an entire class, either a time by yourself or if you watch these videos with classes for other people, to sit down and to go through Daniel 7 and Revelation 13 and say, let's make a list of all of the things that are the same, or at least connected. I've got my little piece of paper here, and here are a couple things that I want to talk about with this. First of all, in Daniel chapter 7, the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the fourth beast all represent kingdoms and empires of man. And if you're at least a little bit familiar with Daniel chapter 7, the lion is Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire. The bear that's raised up on one side in verse 5. So imagine a bear, it's lopsided, raised up on one side. The bear is the Medo-Persian Empire. And if you look at that on a map, you've got a small section of the Medes, and you've got this giant empire of the Persians, and they came together, the Medo-Persian Empire. So it's huge like a bear, but it's lopsided. Excuse me, there is the leopard with 4 wings. So what's a leopard? It's really fast with wings. So this one is like really fast. He can fly. That's going to be the empire of Alexander the Great and Greece. And Alexander the Great just flew across the ancient world, conquering it really fast. And he has this giant empire. And then you have the fourth beast after that, which is Rome. And so it's really important. This for me is really important, not to necessarily be able to identify these empires or to talk about these empires, but just to recognize the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the fourth beast are all kingdoms and empires of man. These are the empire of Babylon, the Medo-Persian Empire, the empire of Greece, and the Roman Empire. These are all human governments, human empires, historically in this world, empires of man. That's really important. And so you've got this picture of the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the fourth beast. Let's go back to Revelation 13 and take a look at this. In verse 2, I'm not going to highlight this. I'm just going to draw your attention to where we are on the page. It says, the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's. Its mouth was like a lion's. And to it, the dragon gave this powerful, his throne and great authority. So there's also a beast coming up a little bit later that's just this monster. So at least the lion, the bear, what's the other one? And a leopard, at least they draw our attention back to this idea of the kingdoms of man. This beast looks like the kingdoms of man. And I'll do this as best as I can. In Daniel chapter 7, you have these 4 beasts: Babylon, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Greece, and Rome. That fourth terrifying beast that was like a dragon and is like something that we can't explain, but it was really, really awful and really, really powerful. That's the Roman Empire. Our book right now, Revelation, is written in the time of the Roman Empire. And so this beast that we're talking about is like a compilation of all of those other beasts put together. And so we are in the time of the fourth beast whenever this is written. So you've got the similarities between the beast, and it points us to the idea of Rome. You've got the connection between the 10 horns. That's one thing that we said. Look back at Daniel chapter 7 and verse 7. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. In Revelation chapter 13, you've got these diadems, these 10 diadems on its horns. One thing that's interesting to me about the 10 horns, if you go back to Revelation chapter 12 in verse 3, the dragon also had 10 horns and 7 heads. And so this sea beast that gets its power from the dragon, from Satan, looks like him. It resembles him, at least in that way. The mouth. We talked about the mouth several times. So Daniel chapter 7 and verse 7, after this I saw in night visions, behold, the fourth beast, terrifying, dreadful, exceedingly strong, had iron teeth that devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it and had 10 horns. I guess that's not the verse that I'm looking for. In verse 8, at the very end of verse 8, it says, there is a mouth speaking great things. And then at the end of the chapter, we talked about that idea. Verse 25, he shall speak words against the Most High. Back in chapter 13, Revelation 13, in verses 5 and 6, the beast was given a mouth, uttering haughty and blasphemous words. So both of them have a mouth that's speaking against God and against God's people. I would at least remind you of this. Do you remember back in chapter 12, in verse 15, we talked about the beast whenever the dragon. When the dragon, Satan, comes and makes war against the people of God, this is one way that he does it. Chapter 12 and verse 15. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman. And whenever we were there, we talked about how does the serpent operate with lies, speaking against God and telling lies and deceiving God's people. And so the beast has a mouth, and he lies and he deceives and he speaks blasphemies against God. Okay, so we've got the 4 beasts and how they represent the kingdoms and the empires of man. We've got the 10 horns. At least it's a connection between the two. Horns in the Bible represent power, and so they're powerful. We've seen authority was given to them in both Daniel 7 and Revelation 13. We've got the mouth. They both have mouths that they lie and they deceive and they speak against God. This one is really important. They both are a story about death and resurrection. Now, I don't want to jump the gun and get to one of my ultimate points, but I guess I will jump the gun here for just a second. But this thing is going to be a parallel with Jesus. You've got the Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and you have the unholy Trinity. You've got the dragon, the sea beast, and the land beast. And one of the things that you notice about the sea beast that we're talking about right now is that he has a death and a resurrection that's very impressive to people. So look at it in Daniel chapter 7. In Daniel chapter 7 in verses 11 and 12, I looked then because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking, and as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed, and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. So it looks like they're destroyed, and it looks like they're dead and gone, but then at the very end of verse 12 it says, but they're allowed to persist, and they go on for a time. So if you go back to Revelation 13 and verse 3, it says, one of its heads, this dragon, this beast, one of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound. It looked like it. It seemed to be like he was killed. Seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. And so there is this apparent death and resurrection that happens. Next, both the Daniel 7 beast and the Revelation 13 beast are actively fighting against God's people and winning. So we saw that a couple of different times in Daniel chapter 7. One example is verse 21. As I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them. And there was another one that we looked at in Daniel 7. I don't remember what verse that was. But in Revelation chapter 13 and verse 7, also it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. So, there's one more thing that I want to say before I start to get to the point. One last connection that I want to draw your attention to is the timing. And the timing is not something where you set a clock and you say, okay, let's count how many things are here. In verse 5, it says, the beast was allowed, Revelation 13:5. The beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words. There's the word thing again. And it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. Do you remember we talked about this? Let me go to my Bible cam here and I can show you next to the 42 months section. I have a note that says, see chapter 11 and verse 3. And you remember back in chapter 11 and verse 3, that's where we made our note about 42 months, 3.5 years, 1,260 days, a time, and half a times. 3.5 is the point on that one. So this beast in Revelation 13 is allowed to exercise his authority for 42 months. And then if you wanted to connect that to Daniel chapter 7, it's down in verse 25. He shall speak words against the Most High and shall wear out the saints of the Most High and shall think to change the times in the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, 1, times, plural, and half a time, 3.5. And one of the things that we talked about back in chapter 11 was 3.5 is that God's people are going to suffer on the way to everybody else in the world figuring out that God is king. So 42, 3.5, 1,260, times, and half a time. Whenever you read that in Daniel and Revelation, what you're thinking is, this is not a fun time for God's people. This is a really hard and bad time for God's people where we're being persecuted by the powers that be while they figure out that God is king. So let me review this real quick. Here are some of the similarities that we've talked about. The 4 beasts represent the human governments, the governments of man, the empires of mankind. The 10 horns, the mouth that speaks blasphemous things and lies and deceit, the apparent death and resurrection, that they fight against God's people, the 3.5, that it's going to be a bad time for God's people of suffering. And you could just keep on doing this. There are even more connections the farther in that you go. But this is what I want to do just for the purposes of this video. Let's go back to Revelation 13, because our big question from the very start of this, our big question has been, what is the point of the text? What am I supposed to take away from this? This is sometimes one of the things that happens here in chapter 13 and verse 3. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. And so what we're going to do is we're going to attach names and historical events to these things. So one example would be, here is the beast, the Roman Empire, and it seemed to have a mortal wound. It looked like Julius Caesar whenever he was killed, like that was going to be the end of the beast. But no, the beast came back and the Roman Empire continued on as its own thing for a while. And maybe that's true for Revelation 13, but I don't want to go that far into the weeds. I just want to stay high level and ask the question, what is going on? What's the message of the text? As we look at all of these things. And so here's what I'm going to do. I saw, verse 1, I saw a beast rising out of the sea. Did you see this in my Bible the first time I came here? Revelation 13 and verse 1. This is what I wrote with my orange pen because this is who I'm going to say this beast is. The kingdoms of man, or you might want to write mankind, or one thing that I like even more than that is humanity. The kingdoms of humanity, specifically who persecute God's people. And so what that's doing as we connect Revelation 13 with Daniel chapter 7 and we learn about the imagery and we start to see what's going on in all of these things is we see that the dragon, Satan, is using the kingdoms of humanity, the kingdoms of mankind, specifically to target and persecute God's people, to fight against them. That might be just our concluding sentence. So let me write my title here in my notes. I have the second of 7 visions, and my title, I'll even write that since I can. It's just something that goes in orange pen in my Bible since it's the heading of the major section. But I'm going to write, this is the kingdoms of humanity. I'll even write this since I have space, that the dragon uses. And then this is the main point. Why is the dragon, or how is the dragon using the kingdoms of humanity to persecute God's people? There you go. So I think this is what's going to be yellow for me as I mark this in my Bible. Verse 7 is going to be one of the keys for me. Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. Yellow. So don't necessarily even worry about identifying the beast. Just know that the dragon is using the beast to persecute God's people. And that takes us down to the very end. This is also probably something that should be yellow, because this is the main section. This is the main point. And you might even do this. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. You might do that as yellow, because that is John writing in Revelation and saying, if you have an ear, listen. He's telling us, this is the main point. This is the thing that I want you to know about this. And it's this sad little poem in verse 10. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword he must be slain. The dragon is using the kingdoms of man to persecute God's people, and it's going to be awful. And it's true. You're going to go into captivity. You're going to be slain with the sword. But then here's the reason why we're talking about this. The main point is, here is a call for the endurance of the saints. And at this point, I'm going to start to make a note next to the word endurance. How can I write this note? Let's add it to the word. I'm going to add it to this selection there. I'm going to put a note on the word endurance. I'm going to make it a blue note, because this is a note about the word endure, and I'm going to write this. Endurance throughout Revelation. I'm going to type my list first, and after I type my list, then we'll go back and read them. Revelation 1 and verse 9, Revelation 2 and verse 2, Revelation 2 and verse 3, Revelation 2 and verse 19, Revelation 3:10, Revelation 13:10, and Revelation 14:12. Let's take a look at those. In Revelation 1 and verse 9, I, John, your brother and partner in the tribulation and kingdom and the patient endurance that are in Jesus. He's writing this letter to Christians who are suffering under the hand of an oppressor, whether it be the Jewish people or the Jewish government or the Roman government. They're suffering under the hand of an oppressor. And he says to them that this letter is about the patient endurance that are in Jesus. When he writes to the church at Ephesus, he says, I know your works, your toil, and your patient endurance. I know that you're hanging in there and that you are enduring. In chapter 2 and verse 3, I know that you are enduring patiently and bearing up for my name's sake, and you've not grown weary. In chapter 2 and verse 19, this is the church in Thyatira. I know your works, your love and faith and service and patient endurance. He's praising them because they're hanging in there and they're holding on. In chapter 3 and verse 10, this is the church in Philadelphia. He says, because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world. In chapter 13 and verse 10, that's where we are right now. The kingdoms of man, the kingdoms of humanity are going to persecute God's people. And he finishes by saying, here is a call for the endurance of the saints. Your job is to hang in there and to hold on for this 42 months while everybody else has to figure out that God is king. And then there's one more that's coming in chapter 14 and verse 12. We'll look at it when we get there. Here is a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. So all of that is just to say this. I probably can't give you a specific identity, and I'm not sure that it's supposed to happen. I don't think that it's supposed to happen where you give a specific identity and say, this is who the sea beast is. I think the sea beast is an abstract picture of the kingdoms and the empires of man that Satan, the dragon, uses to persecute and torture God's people. And the message for God's people is to hang on and endure until they figure out that God is king. There you go. So what I'm going to do is end this video now, and in the next video, I'm going to go to chapter 13 and verse 11, and we're going to talk about the earth beast. And if it's possible, that one might be even more difficult than the sea beast that we just got through looking at.